Good morning. We'll continue our discussion on computation. We were here looking at different ways in which the grid dimensions as well as block dimensions could be specified as 3D, 2D and 1D. We discussed about 2D and so this was our program where the block dimensions were specified using a two-dimensional organization of threads within a thread block. And although we specified a single single thread block, that is the dimension of the grid was 1, that means that it was only in the x dimension. So grid dimensions were 1D, whereas block dimensions were 2D. As I was mentioning last time, we don't really need to worry about this 3D and 2D all the time. It's primarily for ease of access. And therefore, what that means is that you can always program using 1D. And that is what we are going to see now on the next slide. So let's come to the 1D world, which is probably easier to understand. So we again have this N and M defined. And I'm going to specify the number of blocks as well as number of threads using just a single dimension. Right? So I have again this matrix, which is a two-dimensional matrix on the GPU as well as on the host, that is CPU. I perform a CUDA malloc of n cross m elements and malloc of those many elements on the CPU. And then I'm going to call a kernel. And here I'm going to specify the number of blocks and number of threads within a block with which the kernel is launched. And once I have performed some operation on this matrix is going to get copied to H matrix. And then I'm going to print those elements onto the screen. Right? So this is the printing part, and this is the CUDA mem copy, which is being done from device to host. What I would like you to do now is to, given this particular representation, how will you write the kernel, which again initializes the matrix to unique IDs. So you could possibly write it down, take your time, write it down and maybe paste it in the chat box, how the code of the kernel will look like, knowing what we have done so far. And in the process, if there are any questions, please feel free to ask. Okay, I don't see any messages in the chat box. Okay, never mind. So let's understand what is required to get unique IDs. Right? So since we are talking about just the 1D part, that means that I have block ID from, let's say, only in X direction. Right? Because I'm talking about a single number there, 5. So block ID is a single number, therefore it is in the X direction, and that goes from 0 to 4. M, which is the thread ID, that should go from 0 to, let's say, M minus 1 or 0 to 5, and only in the X direction again. So both of these, the block ID as well as the thread ID, are going to be in the X direction, and therefore I need to play around with this. I don't have to use any dot y, because dot y is going to be 0, dot z is going to be 0. And therefore what I need to have is an equation using blockId.x as well as threadIdx.x. I'll need the width of this block, that is the size of this block, to reach a particular thread within a different block, right? So together this is going to give me an equation which is going to be used for finding the unique ID. Okay, Mohit has written threadIdx.x plus blockDim.x into blockId.x. Okay, that seems to be fine. Tarun has written blockIdx.x blockdim plus thread. Yeah, that seems to be fine. So I hope this is clear so far. In case there are any doubts on this or the previous numbering, feel free to ask. Okay, so let's do that as Mohit and Tarun have suggested, that we can have a similar function just using blockId.x and threadId.x, and then the blockdim is going to give you number of blocks within a thread, right? So think about it this way, that you are talking about, let's say from IIT, many students from various departments are going into various buses to, let's say, Mahabalipuram, right? Now the number of buses that you require is going to be, let's say, equivalent to number of thread blocks, and within each block then the seats are numbered, let's say 0 to m minus 1, right? So if you have to identify a particular student, assuming that the buses are numbered 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, if you have to identify a student, you require the bus number, and within that you require the ID of that particular student. And using this equation where I'm talking about that the bus number into number of students inside a bus plus the student number within a bus, that is going to give me the equation, right? So that is what we have written here in that assignment to ID, right? So that is how you can view it to be. Okay, so we'll move ahead from here. So we have identified an equation which is likely to be useful when you are dealing with 1D data, right? If, I mean, it's possible, I mean, what you can extend this, it's possible that you can come up with a very generalized formula, which is probably going to have maybe more than 10 variables in it, which works in all cases, right? So you take care of dot y, dot z, all of that using griddim, blockdim in all directions and so on. So all of these variables you take care of and construct a same formula which you just use, and that will take care of all the cases irrespective of whether you launch the kernel with 1D, 2D, 3D, because some of the values might be 0 and so on. So that is also possible to be done. So in your assignment, which has recently been posted, you have to do essentially this, that the number of threads and with which the kernel is launched, number of blocks and number of threads within a block, those are going to be changed by the caller. The caller is not in your hands, and therefore you have to write only the kernel, which should work irrespective of how it is called, although everything is going to be in 2D or 1D, but you should be aware how to write that code. So that is the purpose of your first assignment, which should cover all the elements, right? So it's a simple matrix addition kernel. So writing the kernel is not going to be difficult. It's just that you should understand how this 2D, 1D mapping happens, right? So that is the purpose of that assignment. If there are any questions on the assignment, feel free to post on Moodle, so that it will be helpful for everybody. Okay, one quick question. If I want the launch configuration to be 2, x, what should that x be? in this particular code. Okay, that sounds fine. M into n by 2 or 15, that sounds good. Okay, good. So that means you are in sync with what's happening. So a small takeaway from here is that our matrix was two-dimensional. It could have been multi-dimensional as well, but we had only single-dimensional launch configuration, and that means that we can use single-dimensional these threads and blocks to access an arbitrary sized data, as long as you have a good mapping. For example, the number of threads sometimes, if it is exactly equal to the number of data elements that you are processing, then there is one-to-one mapping and it's easy, right? So our this matrix of ID equal to ID, such a processing will work. In some cases, the number of threads is going to be larger than the number of data items, in which case we require that check. If ID less than the number of data items, then only perform this. If the number of threads is smaller than the number of data items, what do you do? So you understood the three forms, right? There is number of data items which you are processing. In this case, it is n into m, n cross m matrix, right? So number of elements is n cross m. The number of threads with which we are launching the kernel, that can vary. If it is exactly same as number of data items, then you have one-to-one mapping, and that becomes easy. If the number of threads is larger than the number of data items, then if you just use ID, you can go out of bounds, and therefore you require that check. If ID less than the number of data items, then only process. What happens when you have number of elements larger than the number of threads? Right. Okay. So I'm seeing some messages here. Okay, so okay, so there are multiple answers. KASHYAPI Shubham Bhalchandra is saying that we can process multiple items in the single thread. That is one way of taking care of it. If you have, let's say, 15 threads and 20 data items, each thread can process 2 of them, right? Or 15 threads and 32 data items. 15 threads and 32 data items, each thread will perform 3 or 2 depending upon where the rounding happens. The second suggestion by Rahul is that if TID is less than the number of computations required, then process. But this will, I mean, since number of threads is small, this is going to perform fewer computations than required, and therefore we will not process some data items, right? So this needs to be, one needs to be careful here. And Shagnik is suggesting that some processes will have to wait. What that essentially means is that you can launch the kernel with fewer threads, process some part of the data items, then the other data items need to wait. Then you launch probably the same kernel or with a different, let's say, starting index, or within the same set of threads, they start processing the next set of data items, then next set of data items, like that, right? Which is similar to the first one, but the processing might turn out to be different. For example, you can have a contiguous chunk of data items being processed by one thread, or a contiguous chunk of data items is given to the current set of threads, then the next chunk is given to the same set of threads, and so on. So there could be interleaving of data items, or chunk wise they might be separate, right? So these are all, both of these are valid ways in which you can perform the processing. All right, so we'll move ahead from here. When you have a large amount of data, so far we were just talking about a small number of data items, but by and large, most of your applications will have a large amount of data. Maybe you can have millions of data items in your data setup. In such cases, what one needs to do is to, I mean, we cannot arbitrarily set the number of threads within a thread block. There is a limit. typical limit so far is 1024, which means that you cannot have more than 1024 threads within a thread block. Number of thread blocks is a very large limit, goes probably 2 to the power 31 something, which we will not require. And therefore, you can fix the block size to be 1024 because you are aware that most of the times what you are accessing is a large amount of data. So you can set it to 1024 or 512 or 256, whichever works the best performance wise, and change the number of blocks. Right. So, so I'm just going to show you some calculations based on that. So main has our two parameters. We typically call it int argc and char star star argv. So that is what I have renamed as nn and str. I am getting the number of items, number of data items from the command line. Right? So that a2i of str of 1 is going to give me the second parameter to, I mean the first parameter after a dot out is going to be this str of 1, which I am converting to an integer. Then I have a vector and h vector, one for the GPU, one for the CPU. I'm allocating that using that n. So n is totally unknown at this stage. You can also get it from the like using scanf for that matter. And I'm going to launch the kernel now. For that, I need to calculate the number of blocks that are required. The block size is fixed here, but the number of blocks that I require is dependent on n. So that is going to be ceil of n upon block size. So I get the number of blocks, and then I'm going to launch the kernel using 1D launch configuration, block size being fixed, and then the number of blocks changes depending upon the data size, that is n. So that I pass as a parameter, and then the rest of the processing remains the same. I can then perform some processing, copy the modified data from GPU to CPU, and then print it on the CPU. Right? How does the kernel look like? Well, the kernel will be very simple as it was before. Right? Any questions on? Okay, so there is scan-based approach. Shouvick is saying scanf would be an issue on Colab. I have posted on Moodle how to fix the issue. Sure. So Shouvick has mentioned that how to use scanf onto Google Colab in case you are trying to use. Alternatively, you can have this command line parameters to work. Kashyapi is asking, is there a limit on the number of blocks? Yes, there is a very large limit, as I was mentioning, 2 to the power 31 or so. So practically we don't have to worry about the number of blocks with which we are launching the kernel. Performance wise, it can make a difference. For example, technically this same code you can launch as n comma 1. Right? The number of data elements is n, and then the launch configuration says n comma 1. So n is the number of thread blocks. There is single thread within each thread block. That is also technically possible, but that is not going to give you as much performance as having more threads within a thread block. Right? So your bus should be as full as possible to get the best performance, so that on the road the jam is much lesser. So that is what we would say. Any other questions here? Okay. So if there are no questions, then that's a little strange, because there are problems with this code, right? And not only one, there are two problems with this code. And I thought that somebody will point it out, but you have not. So now it's your classwork to find it out. What are the problems with this code? A check, that is correct.
Sir?
Yeah, Venkat.
Like we need a check. When we are saying check, are we talking about the if condition which checks the bounds, right?
Yes. So this check is required here, because what's happening is that the number of blocks is some parameter, and then the threads within block is 1024. That means it is always going to be a multiple of 1024 as far as number of threads is concerned. But your data size might be arbitrary. N is coming as a command line parameter. I can pass it as, let's say, 2000. But the kernel might get launched with 2048 threads, in which case the additional 48 threads should not be writing vector of ID, because it doesn't exist, because allocation is based on 2000. Allocation is not based on number of threads, right? So therefore, there is a check required here to make sure that we are accessing only valid array elements. So that is definitely one problem. Mem copy. Why is there a problem, Rahul, with mem copy? Okay. So mem copy is, as Rahul is has agreed, there is no problem with mem copy because vector is getting assigned values, and then we are copying from device to host, which means from vector to h vector, and both of these are initialized. Initialized in the sense there is memory allocation being done. We have not initialized it, but that initialization, this is direct assignment. There is no plus equal to minus. There is no relative update, and therefore this seems to be okay. But there is still some issue. Pass the value of n to the kernel. Okay, so that is correct. So if we have to give that id less than n, then we have to pass that as a parameter to kernel. That makes sense. Any other issues? Okay, so just a hint is that, okay, I'll just give you the hint. So first thing is this, that I need to worry about this. The second problem occurs in this line. Now can somebody identify?
So if n is less than 1024, no, that will also work.
Okay.
So that will be integer division.
Okay. Okay, so you guys found it out. This is integer division first, and then I'm applying C, which means that if n is, let's say, 2000, 2000 divided by block size is going to happen first. So 2000 divided by 1024 is going to give me integer 1. That sealed is going to give me 1, and that I'm going to assign to n blocks, which is going to give me a wrong value. Right? For 2000, for n equal to 2000, I want number of blocks to be 2, but it is going to give me. So that seal is applied at for the integer division, and therefore I'm going to truncate away the value automatically initially itself before even seal is applied. So what I'm getting is actually an integer given to seal. What I need is a floating point value. Right? So we'll just fix that these two issues. Right? So yeah, as Shet was also mentioning, we need to pass n as a parameter, so that we will do, so that id less than vector size happens, and then I take a floating typecast for with float, and that is going to give me a floating point value, to which I am going to apply seal, which will give me the exact number. Right? So this will fix our issues. Any other issues in this code? So the reason why I emphasized on this is that you will, first time you implement such things, you will definitely get into these issues, and therefore you should be aware that these are very common issues, and you should not get into this problem. Okay. All right. So let's move ahead. What we will do now is that assume that user is giving some input in terms of x and y coordinates, and for each pair of these points, for each pair, which means that if there are n numbers, then there are whatever n into n minus 1 by 2 number of pairs. We compute the Euclidean distance in parallel. Okay. And you can assume that sqrt is a function which is available on the kernel. And given all of this, after you have done the computation of all of these order n square pairs, I want you to print the maximum distance. Right? So please spend some time thinking about this and write it down. Um, so you could write down actual code, or you can write down pseudo code, and if there are any questions, please feel free to ask. Hopefully this will reveal something, and therefore this classwork has been given. So anybody has any issues in creating such a kernel? So reading of several points, that can be done using scanf in a loop. That is all right. That you can assume that there are n points which you are entering. So that is okay. So you have this information now in CPU array, maybe matrix having n elements. So n cross 2 matrix where you have the x and y coordinates, or you have one array having n elements, another array having n elements to store x and y. That is okay. Now we need to use this information on the GPU. Therefore, we will have to copy this. So there is CUDA mem copy involved. If there is a single matrix n cross 2, then you just require one CUDA mem copy. If you have two for x and y separately, then you require two CUDA mem copies to copy it to the GPU memory. Right. So there is this CUDA malloc involved here and CUDA mem copy. Okay. On the now we have to launch the kernel. The kernel will be launched with not n as the parameter, but n into n minus 1 by 2. Those many pairs are going to exist because we want to do as much in parallel as possible. You can still launch it with n threads, but the parallelism is going to be low because there will be sequentiality involved. Each thread is going to compute the distance with all the points which are larger than the point which is being represented by thread ID. Right? So therefore, that is going to add sequentiality to the processing, and the slowest one is going to slow down your processing, which means that the 0th thread is going to perform this distance calculation with all the n minus 1 points, and that is going to be the slowest one, and therefore that will become a bottleneck, even if others finish faster. So therefore, we would like to increase the parallelism further. The 0 thread computing distance with thread 1, 0 thread computing distance with thread 2, etc. These are all independent calculations, and therefore these can be done in parallel. So n into n minus 1 by 2 number of threads we need to launch. Now n is unknown. If you assume that n is always within 1024, then you can launch it with a single thread block, be done with it. But if not, then you need to perform the similar processing as we did on the previous slide, where there is going to be 1024 as the number of threads within a block, and then n upon 1024 seal of that appropriately. That is going to be the number of blocks. Right? And once you have that, then inside it becomes relatively easy because both the so not really easy. So when you have now the arbitrary number of threads are launching essentially order n square threads are being launched using the thread ID. Using the thread ID, now you have to find out what is both the ID of x2 as well as ID of x1. Right? So the 2 points which are being represented by a particular ID, that needs to be found out. How will you find that out? Well, we will assume that there are going to be n followed by another n minus 1, then n minus 2, and so on. So using that is one way in which you will be able to figure out. Alternatively, you can launch the kernel directly with n square threads. Instead of n into n minus 1 by 2, you can launch it with n square threads, and then just divide by n is going to give you x2, and mod of n is going to give you x1. Right? So using that information, you'll find the 2 points, and then you essentially apply SQRT there. So that part can be done in parallel. Now the question is, how do you find the maximum distance that is there in any of these? Any suggestions? Shagnik also has a question. Can we call another kernel from a kernel? That's a good question. The reason why this might be required in this particular example is that you might launch the kernel with n, and then within that you can launch the kernel based on, from different threads you can launch the kernel as n minus 1 threads, then n minus 2, n minus 3, and so on from different threads. Right? So so calling a kernel from a kernel is supported. So that is called as dynamic parallelism. So you can do that. There are certain restrictions there which we'll worry about a little later, but yes, technically it is possible to call another kernel. That doesn't mean that you will always, so the technicality there is that it doesn't mean that you will get as much parallelism as you would get without dynamic parallelism, that is without nested kernels. Right? So you might be better off doing it by calling it with n square threads than calling nested kernels performance wise. The correctness wise you will get the same value. Okay, Akshat is asking the 2 points thing. So what I was mentioning is that instead of launching it with n into n minus 1 by 2, in which you will have to do computation to identify. So now thread ID is a single ID, right? So let's say that 23 is my thread ID. How do I know which 2 points I have to worry about? So what I was suggesting is that instead of launching it with n into n minus 1 by 2 threads, launch it with n square threads. Right? That's not going to be too bad, although it's definitely more than what we require. But let's say we launch it with n square threads. Now, if I have this ID equal to whatever, blockIdx.x into blockDim.x plus threadIdx.x. Right? So this is the ID that I have obtained within the kernel. So I know my ID. Now how do I know x2 and x1? Right? So there are n square threads, and I need to identify on which 2 points I need to operate. So what I need to do is that x1 is going to be ID by n. N in this case is going to be blockDim.x, right? Or you can pass it as a parameter. And x2 is going to be ID mod n. And that is going to give me, essentially this is the bus number, and within that what is the student number. So this, using the ID itself, I'll be able to figure out. So if I give you that there are 1000 students which are going inside the bus, right? And I know the student ID. Can I figure out what is the bus number and what is the seat number of that student? So I can find the bus number by saying 1000 divided by, let's say, 40 students inside a bus. So that is going to give me x1, that is the bus number. And then x2 is going to give me, ID mod n, which is going to be 1000 mod 40 is going to give me the seat number of that student within that bus. Right? So therefore that I'll get x2. And using this information, I'll be able to, and all of these are unique. So once I have x1 and x2, I can then perform the square root operation. Does that seem reasonable, Akshay? So basically x1 equal to blockIdx.x and x2 equal to threadIdx.x. Yes, provided, yes. So in that case, Yeah, in this case that will turn out to be the same. Okay, let me put it this way. If n is same as blockDim.x, if n is same as blockDim.x, then this will turn out to be the same. Right? If n is something different than blockDim.x, which can happen, right? Because you might have more number of threads than that. Then you will get a different value of for x1 and x2 using this. So this will still work, but I mean the id mod n and id slash n, this will still work, but id slash blockdim.x and id mod blockdim.x will not work, right? So if your number of threads is within the thread block, that is within 1024, then dividing by blockdim.x will work, or just by taking this what Akash has suggested, x1 equal to blockId.x, x2 equal to threadId.x, that will work out, but it will not work in general. Is that reasonable? Sure. Okay, so we'll move ahead unless there are any further questions. So you were telling me how to find the maximum distance, right? So any suggestions on what needs to be done?
Sir, we can find out maximum distance parallelly also.
Okay, how will you do that?
I don't know how to do exactly, but like there will be a group of distances, right? So we can divide the entire group into different like different blocks and find out maximum among all these blocks and then compare, kind of thing.
Okay, so
Some divide and conquer kind of.
sure, divide and conquer kind of thing. So what happens within this Shira is that let's say you have 100 distances computed or 1000 distances computed. Now you want to find the maximum, and these are not ordered, so you don't know where to search for it, right? So where the maximum is, you don't know. Now as soon as, so there is going to be typically a max variable which we will have, which is going to set the value of the maximum distance. Now that maximum distance, this update needs to happen. So if I take all these, let's say there are 1000 values, and I assign one thread to each value. Let's say 1000 threads are operating on different elements. Now they need to compare. What will they compare against? One option is they compare against everybody else. Another option is they compare against this current max. If they compare against the current max, somebody is going to update that value, that common value of max variable. That will not be one person, because if somebody says that okay, current value of max is 2, then threads seeing the value 3, 4, 5, etc., all of those are going to update the value. If you have to compare against everybody else, or let's say threads above me, that is going to be a lot of work. That is possible, but that is going to be a lot of work. Second thing is, it will still involve updating the max, and multiple people might end up updating the max. So that problem occurs. So there are some suggestions. Ashutosh is saying, for maximum, pass another double pointer to the kernel. Sure. But this problem, how do you solve that problem? So that is one possibility. We can allocate a variable in the device, and once we get a distance, we can check with the variable in the device and then copy that to the host once all the distances are computed by the threads. That is fine. That is fine. But this is similar to what I mentioned, that there will be this issue of multiple threads updating the same variable. Can we do a CUDA malloc and initialize it to 0? Yes. Each time we compute the distance, we update the maximum, and finally we can do CUDA mem copy. Yes. Samprit, again, it gets into similar issue. Mohit is suggesting, can we use logs? Okay. So now we are coming to something called as synchronization. So when multiple threads want to write to the same memory location, in this case that max, there is going to be some coordination required within them. That coordination we are going to study a little later, but I introduced that here so that you are aware that such issues will occur, and seemingly simple codes like this, just finding the maximum, will require you something more, and we are going to have elaborate discussion on this when we reach synchronization. So one of them, as Mohit is suggesting, is using locks. There are other ways which we'll probably have to use. If without using any synchronization you want to do, then you can get rid of parallelism. You can just say that I am going to launch a kernel with one thread. Let it go over all the elements and then find the maximum sequentially, right? So that is one short way in which it will work, but that is not parallel. So we would like to do something. Okay, that we'll study later. Don't worry. Any questions so far? Yeah, Venkat, you have a question?
Sir, regarding what Akash said, like we can take X1 as blockId.x and threadId.x. Why can't we take that? Can you explain that part?
Right.
I didn't
So
understand that.
yeah, sure. So we have this number of points is an arbitrary parameter. This will work when the number of points is within 1023, because there is a limit on threadIdx.x, which is 0 to 1023, and therefore it will have to work only when this limit is respected. Beyond that, x2 is probably going to be wrong. Does that seem reasonable?
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, got it, sir. Got it.
Yeah. Any other questions? So Vignesh is saying, so here the issue which we might face is that multiple threads might update the max variable at the same time. Yes, that is correct. When you launch the kernel with a single thread, there is no concurrency. And that means that whatever was your CPU code that you can copy into the GPU code and start executing sequentially, in which case there is no problem because only one thread is updating the max variable. Whereas here, multiple threads might be updating the max variable. That we have to be careful about. We can recursively launch threads from a thread. Yes, you can do that. Each thread among its child threads. The child threads will work in parallel, but that is correct. But the child threads will also have to do it in parallel. So as soon as you have child threads working, even if there are two threads which are trying to write to that max in parallel, you are not sure what is going to happen. Right? So a typical example that is from this book by Herlihy and Shavit is that there is a board and husband and wife are communicating via the board. They are not speaking to each other. Maybe they are angry with each other or whatever. They have a small quarrel. So they are communicating with via a board. Right? As long as one person writes and the same person reads, it is okay. Right? Alternatively, if the other person is not writing and reading, that also is fine. The problem comes when one person is writing and another person is reading. Right? So the example that is given in the book is that the wife writes, "Do not feed the cat." Right? And then the wife wants to say something more. Right? And there is no coordination. They are quarreling. Therefore, there is no coordination between them. And then the wife wants to write another message. So what she is doing is to rub this message. Okay. While rubbing, she rubs the first two words first, and exactly at that time, the husband sees the board, which means that the husband sees definitely an opposite message, feed the cat. And then you can imagine what issues can occur. I mean, the issues can be more than what can happen with the stomach of the cat. So what this indicates is that when multiple threads are trying to write to the same memory location, or even if one thread is writing, another is reading, that can cause issues. This issue is called as, anybody knows?
Sir, are we talking about consistent and inconsistent writes?
Yes, we are talking about definitely consistency. We are talking about concurrency. Yes, so Samprit has given the answer. It's called as a race condition. Yes, Aditya has also added to it. It is called as a race or a data race. So they are racing for updating that value or for reading that value, and anything can happen depending upon which thread is executing with what speed, how the thread scheduling is. Anything can happen. The husband can see the complete message, husband can see part of the message, or husband can see only the empty board. Any of that is possible, right? So this is called as a race. They are racing in time with each other, and our synchronization discussion is going to essentially address this issue, race condition. Yeah, this is also a reader writer problem. This is a more generic name given to these kinds of problems. This is called as reader writer problem. You are right, Rahul. All right. So, okay. So we will move ahead from here. We have a few minutes. So let me briefly explain to you some of the evolution that has happened on the GPUs. Earlier, we used to have something called as graphics processors. Those were not called as GPUs. Those were called as graphics processors. And those have evolved into what we call as GPUs, and after that GPGPUs. So those used to have, early days, we used to have some fixed function which was supported by the graphics processors. And using that, you were able to perform all the processing that you can do, right? So therefore, you were able to do only the graphics related operations, right? So this was not programmable. This was the only one that is supported in the hardware are some instructions which are related to graphics and nothing else, right? You cannot do anything else. Later, early 2000, there is this portion of the graphics processor which is called as a shader, which adds shading to the image. That was made programmable. As soon as it was made programmable, it allowed the graphics designers to perform additional processing onto the data elements, right? And at that time, it was still initially data elements, but people realized that I can do similar things. Since the shader is programmable, I can do similar things when I map my data into graphics. So even if I have, let's say, some points in 2D geometry which are not graphics related, let's say those are some particles in an ocean wave, I can perform similar processing as is supported by the graphical hardware and get my processing done in parallel. So that was very interesting, and this programmable shaders took up was kind of very became very popular, and people started realizing its value because it was very first of all very concurrent, and it started giving in some sense much larger throughput than what was possible using a few cores on the CPUs. So at that time also the number of cores was large, probably a few hundreds, and that was turning out to be very interesting. So then people realized that if you make this programmable, so at that time shaders, meaning that the processing was still done using a graphics pipeline, but you can map your application into graphics form, into the graphics language, into the graphics API. So if you want to make, so those were called as essentially GPUs, graphics processing units. If you wanted to make it for general purpose applications, instead of mapping your general purpose application onto this graphics language, what you could do is to allow arbitrary APIs, which are more for general purpose programming similar to C. And that is where the CUDA architecture was devised, which allowed you to write all these processing in a different way. Although this is only up to 2012, the final processing has really been caught up. There are additional lots of new flexibilities which have been added to CUDA and so on. So this became really the GPGPU, general purpose graphics processing unit. So that is where, that is how this evolution happened. And this is what I was mentioning, that originally we had this CPU and then GPU was used as a separate device. Currently also it gets used in the discrete GPUs. This was called as a pipeline. This was the graphics pipeline. And at different stages, we perform different operations onto these pixels. So initially you have the application which you apply certain light on and get into some transformation. For example, you might want to convert it into a triangulation or a quadrilateral form, right? Then you apply certain smaller assembly primitives to get it to uh, uh, in the language which is supported by the graphics. Then, so which was from the application level now into small, let's say, triangles or quadrilaterals which you can operate. Then you rasterize it and get into pixel level. Then you apply some sort of shading. I mean, this is called as a shader, but you can apply arbitrary transformations there to the pixels. You can change their intensity and so on. And all of this is operating onto a video memory, or it used to be called VDU, or video memory, which was also called as a texture. This texture was very specific. It was designed for 2D and 3D geometry, because that is how our images are. And that you can operate on multiple times. That is, you can apply multiple functions via this shader onto this. Right? So this is what people tried to do. So what they initially did when CUDA was not there is that different applications like plotting, folding, even stock options, pricing, some of the SQL queries, and as well as in biomedical imaging, they applied all these applications and converted these into a language of shaders, language of the graphics processors. And that was very not very productive, I would say, because it required intense knowledge of the graphics API. And the complexity was large. You are talking about vertex coordinates, textures, and shader programs rather than really talking in terms of the application language, right? So we are very far away from the application when we are writing such programs. Thankfully, we don't have to write it these days. Then random accesses were not supported. So this video memory was primarily for imaging. So it supported that you can go from a particular X, Y, Z to, let's say, X plus 1 Y, Z, or X, Y plus 1 Z, and so on. So nearby cells you were easily able to go to, but not an arbitrary cell, right? So, and there was no double precision support at that time. So all of this evolved into a new language called CUDA, which has now become more like a framework. So I'll stop here because we have exceeded the time. We'll discuss briefly this, and then we'll get into the computation part again. Any quick questions? All right. So we'll stop here. See you tomorrow at 9 o'clock.